I like to call this lesson my big value shapes lesson, or sometimes I call it my paint by number lesson, and you'll see why later. I'll be painting black and white objects and using only black and white paint, so I can purely focus on value, not having to worry about color at all. I'll start with an underpainting sketch and big shapes of light and shadow, showing you how I break my subject down into the biggest possible shapes I can find. I'll show you how I use my value card to explore what the values are of my subject and how those values relate to each other, creating what I like to call a value hierarchy for my painting. Then I'll move into my big value shape layer, where I'll mix and check the values of my paint as I fill in those big shapes on my canvas. I'll assess and adjust until the image begins to read. Next, I'll work towards breaking those big shapes down into smaller shapes, eventually leading to a level of detail and finish for the piece.
So I'm painting on, I actually have a sheet of loose canvas, which is what I use whenever I'm doing studies and demos and things like that. Sometimes I'll be painting on a Raymar canvas, but this is this brand of Paramount, it's 12 by 16 Paramount canvas, which I like. So I like to use two palette knives. I'm a two palette knife person. I always have two. When I'm mixing, I have two in one hand and I'm working them together. But my main mixing one is this one, just because I find that it picks up more paint better and it kind of mixes the paint faster. Here I have a nice big pile. This is titanium. It's actually titanium zinc white by Gamblin, but titanium white works as well. I'm going to be mixing my neutral dark. I called it black earlier, but it really, I like to think of it more as just a neutral dark. And so it doesn't need to be a perfect gray, perfect neutral gray or anything like that. It just needs to be a neutral color and it needs to be dark. So this is an old palette that I have from a while back. It was mixed with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, which is a really nice way to achieve a really, really dark and pretty neutral. I mean, those two colors neutralize each other really well. Another way to do this is to mix a red, a yellow, and a blue together to make a neutral dark. But this isn't enough. I know I'm gonna need more. I only wanna mix it one time at the beginning. If I have to mix it again later, it is almost impossible to get the exact same color and temperature and exact same amounts of paint in each pile. So I want to make sure that I have a nice big pile of paint to start. I'm using this old thing of Winsor & Newton. It's burnt sienna. This is ultramarine blue and it's by M. Graham, which is a brand that I often, M. Graham and Gamblin are the main brands of paint that I use. And see how much paint I'm pulling out? Can't tell you how many students I come across who are afraid to lay the paint out. And for this, you really want to use a lot. See, I'm just gonna go ahead and use it all. So I can get a nice big pile of paint. And you see how quickly this stuff just gets so dark, so dark and rich. It seems like it has a lot of blue in it. You know, I don't think it matters too much if it leans in any temperature, or, you know, it might lean more blue or more burnt sienna. It doesn't matter too much. The important thing is that it stays consistent throughout the whole painting. So you don't want to change it up later. But I will say that I tend to like it when my darks have a little bit more warmth to them, which is why I just added more burnt sienna. I don't like them to be too cool, and it's just more of a personal preference. And I want to mix them together, so I need to make sure that I have this one very large pile. I do make sure that I thoroughly mix my pile. I don't want my color to be streaky within my pile of paint. I always want to make sure I have a nice clean palette. I like to keep this little paper towel here because when I'm mixing, I can actually just rub my palette knives on it. My palette knives are clean right now, but I'll wipe my paint off there. I've got my baby wipes that I can quickly clean. You can also use just some Gamsol on a towel. And the way that I set up my palette is I always have, and this goes for every painting I do, is I have a row at the top of my palette. My lights are always on the left, my darks are on the right, and it's in order, in value order. So even if I have tube colors out, it would be in value order of the colors from light to dark. And in this case, because I'm using white paint and dark neutral paint, I just have two piles. But as I begin to mix, I'm actually going to build out some in-between piles that live up here, and then I will use the space here for brush mixing in between. I have my, in this little top, is just pure Gamsol. The other medium that I have that is going to be for later is, this is, I think it's walnut oil. It might be safflower oil. One of the two. I can't remember what I put in here. I will start with Gamsol with my underpainting, and then and my first layer of big shapes I will be using Gamsol, but for my third and fourth layer I will put that away and I won't want to be using this. Okay, for my underpainting I'm just going to be using the dark paint. This is going to allow me to have a very transparent layer with no thickness. So I'm ignoring my white paint. It's still on my palette, but I'm ignoring it for now, and I'm just going to be painting with this. If I'm doing a small painting, my underpainting will generally be with a small brush. These two, I like these size 2s. These are Silver Brush Bristling brand size 2. And they're both, you can see that they're worn a bit on the surface, but they're good for an underpainting. So I'll have both of these available here. I don't paint on a dry canvas. I'm always going to put something down before I get started. Now, what that something is kind of depends on the painting. So if I know it's going to take me multiple days to complete it, I will put a layer of oil, just oil by itself, and I will wipe it down and get it very dry. I just want to let that oil soak in. And if I just use oil, it helps my surface actually stay wetter longer. If I'm painting, if I know it's going to be a short painting, like the painting that I'm doing today shouldn't take me that long, I will just use Gamsol to prep my canvas. That's what I'm going to use today. And it is going to be, Gamsol dries quickly, so it will help me get my underpainting in. That's all that's on my paper towel, is just some Gamsol. And I'm saturating the surface. And then after I saturate it, then I'm going to dry it. I want to get any excess liquid off. And I do this either way. If I'm using oil, I do this. If I'm using Gamsol, I do this the same way. So I don't want there to be any, I don't want it to be wet to the touch. I want it to be dry to the touch. But I want there to be something in there. I hold my brush like this. I might hold it, a lot of artists will recommend holding it out and like this. I switch between, and depending on, I'll choke it up a little bit more as I get more detailed, and I'll start using my arm like this. But for starting and for getting into my main composition and drawing, I will start like this.